Welcome to the Microsoft Partner Network Thought Leader Podcast series. Today, we're talking with Jo Burston, the CEO and founder of Rare Birds, a company that seeks to give 1 million women globally the opportunity to become entrepreneurs by 2020. She is also the author of 3 books, Brilliant Business Kids, Australia's 50 Influential Women Entrepreneurs, and hashtag If She Can, I Can, has advised the Prime Minister of Australia, and serves as a global ambassador for Microsoft. In part 1 of this 2-part episode, Jo looks at the dynamics of developing markets.
If we could start just by that goal of 1 million more women entrepreneurs by 2020, what are some of the barriers that are unique to women?
I think I want to talk about the stats before the barriers, because what I love to do is, if we start with the barriers, then that's what we're going to remember. Mm-hmm. And what I want to remember is the information that's important, and then what we're doing to actually help women to get to those numbers, and in a really progressive and modern way. You know, think not so much about the challenges, but think about what are the tools and resources that we actually have to get there.
Perfect.
Yeah. So I'm going to read a little bit of this first, and you can take what you need from it. So at a national level, governments and agencies know that if we can bring more women into the workforce, we'll boost per capita income and GDP growth. And they also know that it has a massive ripple effect in community as well as corporate. And an example for in emerging markets, women invest and reinvest 90 cents of every dollar of their income earned back into their families. And that's into their health, their well-being, their education and nutrition. So by empowering more women to become financially secure, and they can reinvest in a really positive way, and this does create a global economic ripple effect. In comparison, men are only reinvesting 30 to 40 cents in every dollar. So it's a huge gap there. And I think if we were to see, some of these, ratios in the developed world, they're even higher. Goldman Sachs report, giving credit where credit's due, investing in women and girls is one of the highest returned opportunities available in the developing world. But what I want to talk about really is beyond women in the workforce, or beyond women as a B2C opportunity, but women entrepreneurs in particular. And they are starting businesses at twice the rate of men in the US alone, and at a rate of 4 times as many women-led entrepreneurs as male-led entrepreneurs are being formed currently, and that's both in the developing and non-developing world. So really, what I like to talk about is where are these women, how do you find them, and how do we encourage them to really grow themselves and their businesses. And so what that comes down to for me is that there is a lot of money to be made taking women entrepreneurs seriously. And we're in the business now of capturing that new business opportunity, and organisations like Microsoft and large-scale companies are now starting to really identify this market as something that's valuable to them. We know that if, in the next 3 years, we think more than 50% of businesses will be started by women. And if that's the case, there's now 37 million SMB owners across the US. And just by moving the needle this tiny little bit, there's an opportunity there for another 13.5 million led women entrepreneur businesses in the next 3 years. Wow. These women are really incredibly capable. They're sassy and they're capable and they're smart, and they want to grow businesses. They want to scale them. They want to use technology to do that. They're either building technology or enabled by it. But mostly they're doing it because they want flexibility and they want financial freedom, and they don't want the guy to be the financial plan in the future. And they're setting themselves up so that when they do get older, they're secure and they're safe, no matter what happens in that journey in their life. And we see that entrepreneurship, particularly for women, is sometimes a forced issue, because it is the only way that they can create that flexibility in their life. When they've got families and children, the 9 to 5 doesn't always work, or the 7 to 10, what companies sometimes require them to do doesn't always work. So they do want to be able to work at 2 o'clock in the morning, and it doesn't mean they work any less hard or they don't have access to as many resources. It just means they want to choose when it suits them to make their own money. What we also see at the moment is that 41% of enterprises in the US are currently run by women, and like I said, we think that over 50% will be the next 3 years. And I think the staggering statistics around that are really an indication of opportunity and not of problem, because I don't think it is a problem. I think it's an opportunity, and it's an opportunity for women as well. I want to tell you a couple of stories, and one of them is my story. And it'll give you a bit of a indication or highlight about how there is such deep wealth and deep, reward for taking this market really seriously in the future. As long as 2005, I was running a company as a CEO, and I was at the top of my game, and I had no previous formal education. I left high school. I didn't go to university. My father's a fireman. My mother was working class bank teller. She rose through the ranks. There was no business people in my family whatsoever. And that was immediate, and uncles, aunties, cousins as well. So I never saw that being in business was an opportunity. And it wasn't until in 2005 I met a serial entrepreneur, and I met with him to pitch the services of the business I was currently working for, running. And I was late for the meeting because my plane was late, flying from Sydney into Melbourne. Oh, no. And I missed my meeting. I couldn't have it. I rang his PA and I said to her, I'm really sorry about being late. I'm here in Melbourne now. I'll meet with him any time of the day or night. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. I'll meet. I'm here. And I said, look, I'm at your mercy on this one. So she rang me back about 2 o'clock that day and she said, please come in. He's got another 15 minutes. And I walked into his room, into his office, and at the time, 2005, it's pre-GFC. He was day trading, commodities trading, equities trading, and had lots of screens around this office with a really big, beautiful wooden desk. And he was standing up in front of one of these screens. And he said to me, take a seat anywhere you want. And I knew he was a serial entrepreneur, but that's all I knew. And I walked around to his side of the desk, and I actually sat in his chair. And I said to him, I'm going to sit here one day anyway, so I'm going to start now. And that was a true story. And I backed myself. I really backed myself. I didn't know why I did it. I didn't know what I was expecting, but I knew it was the right person and it was this right energy. And I remember meeting him and thinking, that's who I want to be as I grow, not what I want to become or what I want to do as I get older. And I think that was a question that was never asked of me when I was younger, and that is, who do you want to become as you grow versus what do you want to do when you get older. And I think one's a job title, I think the other one's a passion and a cause or a purpose. So I sat down in the chair and the 15 minutes turned into 3 hours, and 6 weeks later I had my first investor, my first mentor, and my journey started as an entrepreneur, and that was now 11 years ago. So he's still my mentor. He's still the non-exec chairman of my company, and now I'm 5 technology companies down the track. I've sold a couple. I always say I've broken a couple, and one's broken me. But what I learned to do was see the world through new lenses, and that was as an entrepreneur, and allow my creativity and my thirst for knowledge and my sense of curiosity to really flourish again. And I wasn't set in the confines of a building or a corporate hierarchy that I was before. And so really over the next 5 to 6 years, I knew that anything was possible. And in 2009, my first business, Job Capital, which is still running today, was named the fastest starting company in Australia. And then by 2012, it was named the most successful business in Australia that was privately owned, turning under 100 million. And by that stage, we were getting close to the 50 million turnover, and that was only in 5 years. So I dedicated all of these immediate resources that I had, even though I really didn't know much about building a business. But what I did was I thought, what is around me that I have? What am I already capable of doing? What are the resources that I have access to? And if I don't have access to them, how can I find them? Who can I ask the right questions to? What do I need to try? Then what do I need to do to see if it works? And then how do I reflect on the results of what I've done? I use that theory and principle all throughout all the companies that I've built, and I call that the ask, try, do, reflect principle. And it's really how entrepreneurs learn, and it's learning in action. So I was standing on a stage in 2012 and I was acknowledged for my contribution to technology mid-career. Previous to that, I'd been to China and I self-organised a trip of entrepreneurs to go to China. And that was to do a bit of discovery, because Australia is 26 million people, only 800,000 female-led companies today, which is a very small number globally. But I wanted to look at technology and I wanted to see what big markets were doing with technology. So I flew to Shanghai and I crammed in about 34 meetings in 5 days. And I wanted to look at all different industries. I wanted to look at, manufacturing and export and the legal system, how they marketed, what they were doing with digital, what they were doing with FMCG. And then I discovered a company that was using cloud services and cloud data that was provided by a German-run company. And I had this really huge aha moment. I thought, this is the next thing. This is what's going to happen next. And I want to be on the early stage of that. So I had a good conversation with them. I learnt how they were delivering services to big markets because, it's a billion population. And I wanted to take the learnings that I had from China and bring them to Australia. And I did that, and I started to develop SaaS products. And I started to develop SaaS businesses and marketplaces where I could solve problems for, a minute amount of the cost that it would take for humans to solve those problems in businesses, and really use technology to disrupt current business delivery models, removing pieces of paper and hands and replacing that with technology. So I built another company called Big Data, and it's crazy that I actually called it that back then. How did I ever get the URLs? But I was reading about big data and I thought, this is what I'm doing. I'm collecting information and I'm doing something meaningful with it and this data. And I built this contingent workforce platform, which is, takes the independent or freelance worker or ABN holder all the way from starting a contract, timesheeting, managing their debtors, doing their invoicing in a horizontal platform. Mm-hmm. So no one had done that before in Australia, and particularly no one that I knew globally had done it in a SaaS way that was a marketplace where, the customer was paying cents per transaction, not millions of dollars for an enterprise model. And so I was standing on this stage in 2012 and accepting some acknowledgement for my contribution to technology. And by way of context, I've never learned how to code, but I can basic code now. Mm-hmm. I didn't study technology at any institution, but I really have a nous for understanding business problems and working out how to solve them with technology now. And I looked out to the sea of people, and what was remarkable was there was really very few women in the room. Uh-huh. And it had happened to me a lot over the years where I was really the only chick at the table. And I was really, at the time my head was down and I was chasing the hungry ghost of ambition, and I really wasn't putting my head up to see where the women were. Mm-hmm. I suffered, sexism at work. From time to time, I would go to board meetings and I'd sit down at the boardroom table. My middle-aged, balding, grey-suited CFO was always acknowledged first in the room, or he was addressed first as well when there was questions asked by the other party. And and that happened quite a few times. I made a pact with him and said, next time that happens, you need to turn to that person and say, I think Jo, the CEO and founder of the company, might be the best person to answer the question. So he had my back, which was great, and he always did have my back. And then I went to Melbourne and I was acknowledged for another award for my contribution to technology in Australia. And I was at a table with 12 people and I was the only female entrepreneur at the table. They were all male entrepreneurs and really, you know, people I really respected and I think have done amazing things. But it just left me really unhappy. And I thought, I've got to work out what's going on here. So I took a film crew to my old high school and my old primary school, and I thought I'm just going to find out from a grassroots level what these young women and girls think about their ambitions and if they can tell me who they want to become as they grow. And we had a really lovely conversation. I filmed them. They were between the ages of 8 and 17. And when I asked them about their ambition and I described to them what an entrepreneur was, and I started to ask them really what they thought an entrepreneur was, every single one of them responded that they thought it was a man.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, painful.
And that was 17 kilometres from the centre of Sydney, in, you know, a southwest working class school background. Right. And I was horrified. I was really horrified. So I went home that evening and I actually cried. I was sad. I've got 2 nieces and I thought if this is the script in their heads and this is what they think the future is, then that's really sad because we're not enabling opportunity to 50% of our population. So I thought I'm going to change this. This is my duty to change it. And that was another big aha moment for me. And what happened was that my ambition changed, and it changed from chasing the hungry ghost, which is very unfulfilling and you always need to give it more and fuel it more, to being purpose-driven. And so my ambition started to pull me and guide me versus push me, which is a really big change in how I perceived the business world.
Jo concludes her discussion in part 2 of this episode. Check out the other podcast episodes in this series to learn more from Microsoft Partner Network thought leaders. Keep in touch with us via LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube by searching for the Microsoft Partner Network. And be sure to follow us on Twitter with the handle @MSPartner. And if you like the podcast, don't forget to rate and review it.